All right, it's connecting us. We should be live. Hello, everyone. So, a few other people should join us here in a bit. Tonight is all about military and veteran suicide. And what those numbers look like is purely atrocious, to be honest. It's just ridiculous. Um, Something like, depending on whether you're looking at men or women, is somewhere between 52 and 62% higher than the general population, which are numbers that are just insane. And as a veteran, we'll get to Doug here in a minute, and there'll be some others joining in. Um, I'm getting tired of hearing thoughts and prayers. I'm getting tired of hearing, oh, let's donate some money to the family. Let's do a walkathon to support this family. Enough's enough, right? We've dealt with this shit for how many years, and the numbers get worse every year. Which to me is just almost criminal that we just love to say these things and instead of actually going someplace with it. So my particular background with it, when I was a soldier, there were a couple of guys in my unit that tried. Everybody was either stopped in process or was revived when they were almost successful. So nobody was successful, but there were certainly people that tried. Um, the After the fact, I know some people after they got out that were successful in their attempts. And if you look at the numbers and you see people talk about it, when you watch the news, you get sort of the '06 and up ranks. You get the colonels and above that come on and talk about statistics and numbers. And hey, we've got more of a budget. We're going to throw money at it. Throwing money at it's not really the solution. They blame everything from TBI to PTSD to drug abuse and alcohol abuse. Yet nothing ever seems to change and the numbers get worse. Part of the problem that I've seen is transition out of the military into civilian life tends to result in either unemployment or underemployment, especially in the enlisted ranks. And those money troubles eventually lead to other troubles that eventually lead to all kinds of problems in your day-to-day life. And that leads sometimes some people to either attempt or commit suicide. Um, so people on the channel talk to me all the time. Doug, why don't you tell everybody who you are? And Mike will join us here in a minute, and we'll sure get into this. By the way, cursing is permitted on this channel all you want to. Does not bother me in the least. And if anybody doesn't like it, I would change the channel now.
I'm Doug Franklin. I'll try to keep my cursing to a minimum. I was a cavalry platoon leader to start, and then I was a mortar platoon leader, and then while I was in Iraq, I got snatched out of the mortar platoon and stuck into a staff job where I got I got into more gunfights as a staff officer than I did as a platoon leader, which is kind of funny. After that, I left the Army, got kind of underemployed in a home construction job, and left that, built for myself for a little while, and had a healthcare company for a little bit, and that got squished by some legislative changes, and we got into writing books, and eventually wound up doing home efficiency improvement sort of stuff.
So, did anybody under your command ever attempt to or successfully commit suicide?
Not that I am aware of. While we were overseas, I was very successful at keeping everybody out of trouble. That's we can get kind of into the weeds on that. But there was one of my neighbors while I was at Fort Hood.
Mm.
He was the HAC company commander for the Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those things. It was like I was just out filling my gas tank, and the police came, and like 2 units of police, 4 officers come into the gas station, and they were haggard. It would have been a rough night for them, and I made the mistake of asking what happened, and they're like, yeah, an officer dressed himself in his blues, stepped into the shower, and started a pistol. And apparently he was still alive and looking around with 3/4 of his head missing. So they'd had a rough night. And then being a platoon leader, you're not supposed to cross streams. So I'd go out with my platoon leader buddies and stuff like that. And we would bump into troops from our battalion. And one of the folks I went out with periodically was a good looking bartender from one of the bars. Bartender from the bars, but I won't say her name. But she was a gorgeous woman, blonde hair, Hawaiian, just curves to die for kind of thing. So we'd go out, and after work, she'd meet. We'd hang out for a little while and go our separate ways. But while I was with her one night, after my buddies had called in a night, one of the troops from the battalion came over and met her, and we spent our year kicking indoors. And when I left the battalion, I went over to be Brigade 1. So as you're folding out, the last person to leave is typically your 1 and your 4, because they're the ones making sure all the people are gone, making sure all the supplies and stuff that you need to bring home are on the planes or boats or wherever they're going. So it was basically the major and little old me. But we were folding out the division. We were one of the last units in the division to leave, and as the brigade headquarters, and we were. So I think it was the last plane out, and when I got back, I went to her team and worked. Excuse me, and she wasn't there, and then a few days later, I'd gone back, and she came in, and we went out again, and she was kind of stressed, and turns out that the soldier who I introduced her to found her in a parking lot and then started his pistol in front of her because she was with somebody else at the time, and he just finished it right in front of her in a freaking 7-Eleven parking lot.
Yeah, those sorts of stories are unfortunately far too common. The Mike who just joined us, who's also no stranger to Fort Hood, who spent a lot of time there. Mike, I've already gone through sort of my take on it, where we talked about a few things, including especially as you get out, kind of what the situation is like. But I didn't want to kind of go too deep until we had other people on the line. So since you're here, why don't you talk a little bit about what you did, and whether you saw anybody experienced or knew anybody on active duty or since then who has either attempted to or committed suicide.
Oh, God.
Yeah, let me shut the door here.
So one of the interesting things about this kind of stuff is that I don't know a single enlisted person who is untouched by the subject. Not one. I do know about 30 who didn't want to come forward and talk publicly because they all said the same thing. Who the fuck cares? We can talk all we want. Nobody's going to change anything.
Yeah.
And
when you brought this up to me, it was one of those things. Who cares? I mean, Tim, you and I have talked about this, God knows how many times. But Doug, to give you a little bit of background, Tim and I have known each other for decades. We both went in, and where he got to go play with the Green Beanies, I got to go play with Armored Cav. And so I spent roughly about 2 years playing over in the desert for various reasons in various places. And just watched people fall apart. Yeah, I was listening to a little bit of your story when I came in, and I've heard many things like that. I've seen several of them.
As a former medic, I'm sure you've seen some really fun stuff.
Oh God, yeah. I've seen guys try to drink themselves to death. Just bottles just lined up and just downing them, just trying to go that way. I've seen them mix pills and alcohol. That's just in the barracks. Later with the in the NCO roles, and doing health and welfare checks for some of the guys that had missed a couple of days here, a couple of days there, and going in and just looking in their apartments and just going, holy shit, how do you live like this? But yeah, I knew one guy that, and luckily he is still here today, but he was living in the Northeast and had parked his Jeep on a public boat launch, taking the doors off, the cover off, loaded it with weights, bricks, sand, yada, yada, yada. And it zip tied his wrists to the steering wheel. So he couldn't stop. And luckily someone got there.
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of things, especially after transition. I mean, when you're on active duty, it's a different situation because there's always everybody's really up in each other's business, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Sometimes you want privacy. Other times, everybody at least knows when you're a little bit off, right? Because when you live that closely with people for so long, you can tell something's wrong with somebody's behaviors change. You can tell it pretty fast. After transition out, the numbers are also pretty bad. And Doug, I hope you don't mind, but I looked at the numbers and then it's sort of 50+% higher than the general population. But if you take the officer corps out, it gets even worse, right? It's even worse when you look at just enlisted. He was a former 03, Mike. So it because I think
we won't hold you out of it.
A lot of people have the misunderstanding that as a veteran you have a lot of things for life. You've got job assistance, you've got housing assistance, you get a VA loan, but look at that's not necessarily the panacea it's made out to be.
Hey, now don't forget those toll tag discounts.
Oh, gee, I get a toll tag discount. Woohoo!
You get them.
So
don't get me started.
So you've got those problems, but when you transition, what I've found in everybody I've talked to, it's like I talked to some retired colonels, a retired 2-star, and another retired Marine that was even higher ranked. And the Marine who was higher ranked was kind of vicious about it. Not only did he not want to come talk about it because he's too well known, he wouldn't want to put his reputation on it. But he's like, when you transition people out, he's like, 06 is enough. We've got those guys set. We're like, okay, here, go meet this guy at Raytheon. Go meet this guy at Lockheed. Go meet this guy over here, and you get a job, right? And those guys pull $175,000 a year up jobs. Whereas in the enlisted guys, sort of the 03s and down to the world, we're like, okay, here's your bus ticket. Thanks. Right. And that's pretty much it. Right. Well, no, I actually paid for the airline ticket home because I wasn't going to take the fucking bus for 4 days. But my point is that it's the transition is like, okay, thank you for your service. Bye. Oh, you applied for college. Great. See you. Right. So that doesn't help if you're like, I was in a different situation than most former enlisted. I didn't come out with a wife. I didn't come out with, all kinds of other things hanging on. I got to go right back to college. It was kind of just me.
Yeah.
But that's not typical. Most people come out with a wife and 3 kids or 2 kids or something, and all these responsibilities, and they can't just go to school full time. I was lucky in that regard. But that causes issues in that it's like, okay, thank you, have a nice day, get out. And the next thing you know, you don't have health insurance, you don't have a place to live, you don't have housing assistance. You've got to go find a job that you're not going to make as much at. It sounds like better money, but when you look at all the benefits, it's really not. And everybody's like, okay, well, you're a vet, it's no big deal for you. I've gotten to the point when I didn't own my own company, I got to the point where I was like, all these applications, you get down to the bottom of it, you're like, okay, what's your veteran status? I almost started taking it off and just not listing it because I felt like it was sort of working against me. And when I became kind of higher ranking in the companies I worked for, there was sort of this thing that said, hey, veterans, especially enlisted veterans, are hard to work with. They're grumbly, they're opinionated. They tell you the truth, but they don't tell you nicely. You got to work on their soft skills. And what that leads to is underemployment. Money problems lead to stress. Stress leads to potential suicide problems. When I started looking at the VA stuff, on what the VA says the causes of all the suicides are, PTSD, TBI, and former drug abuse, and drug use ongoing. And I'm like, bullshit. That stuff comes from somewhere, right? That there's an underlying cause for a lot of this. And even the VA started to say unemployment and underemployment is a large part of it. They're still not saying it's a major component, but I hear this all the time when it's an election year. It's like, oh, we got to support our veterans. We're going to do more to support our veterans. We're going to throw money at it. You don't need to throw money at every problem. You need to come up with actual programs that fucking solve shit before you throw money at it. And one of those programs is that if something like that got put together that helped veterans actually find decent paying jobs that had sort of the same lifestyle at or above or whatever their rank was, would be super nice, because we have a lot of homeless vets that are never heard from anymore because they're pretty good at staying homeless. We got a lot of suicides going on, and drug use and alcohol abuse is everywhere. And I don't think it's all caused by PTSD and TBI. I'll find some of it, but I think that financial problem has as much to do with it as anything else. And when you've got employers who look at former soldiers and be like, oh my God, one of those guys, right? And they kind of roll their eyes. To me, that's just sort of a big double-edged sword, right? You join the military for all the job experience. You join the military so you can get a job after. And then it turns out that's not really all that much help. Unless you're a former MP and you want to go straight into law enforcement.
Well, and here's a real kick in the tits is that, when I left, when I got out, I was a non-commissioned officer. I was a trauma leader. I ran our forward aid station. I was a EMTM instructor. I was BTLS, ACLS, or BCLS. I was working on my ACLS. I was a BTLS instructor. I had more certifications out the wazoo. I could do meds, IVs, minor surgeries, several actual serious surgeries. And the most I could get in the medical field was a CNA. So that was 10 years down the shitter because no one cared. Nothing transferred over. Oh, you're nationally certified. National certification didn't do nothing.
Whereas if you'd taken those 10 years and gone to all the schools and everything else, your income goes from whatever you were making to 3-4 times that pretty fast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? So it puts you in a whole different world. So those skills.
I would have, if I would have taken those 10 years, I would have come out as a PA, at a minimum a PA, making $150,000, $200,000 a year.
Yep.
Instead of being a CNA living in the Chicago area, making $9.50 an hour.
Barely above minimum wage, right?
Trying to go to college at the same time.
That's the kind of problem I'm hearing about. And the other thing I hear, and Doug, maybe I'd love to have your opinion on this, is so many veterans that have these experience and have these problems are afraid to come forward because they're like, who gives a shit? We get used as a prop on 4th of July, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. And like during election season, you see all these things like, oh, we're gonna fix veterans, and Doug and I were talking about it before we went live. Oh, let's force congressmen and senators to go on the VA medical system, which, by the way, never in a billion years would that pass Congress, right? That's a mere talking point for people trying to get applause and raise money. So veterans who don't even want to come forward and talk about it anymore because they're sick of talking, they're sick of hearing about it, and they're sick of everybody just sending thoughts and prayers and having a walkathon when somebody kills themselves. That's the kind of stuff I'm seeing, because I even had a Marine Guard, a former Marine Guard who served in Moscow during the Cold War, tell me it's not worth coming forward.
No.
If you got
my favorite
Marines,
is Happy Memorial Day. Like, you want to send me into a tailspin, wish me a happy Memorial Day. You're getting a talking to no matter where we are.
So you're saying thanks for all my dead brothers and sisters. You're an asshole.
That's literally what I tell them. Like, look, Memorial Day is for my buddies who didn't come home. You're missing the point, dude. And it's like, do you want me to start listing off the names, the ones that I watched? Like, do we want to go down that road? How about we just remember that? Let's think about this. It's not just about mattresses in the beginning of summer and what pant color to wear.
And barbecues, I've turned it around that when they say something like that, I just turn around and say disrespect to the fallen. Just because it throws them back on them going, oh shit. And it sounds, I know it sounds stupid, but I would rather look them dead square in the eye and say, I respect the fallen.
This year on Memorial Day, I actually tried to put out on Twitter and a few other places. I'm like, look, a couple days before, I'm like, look, Memorial Day is coming up, and remember, this ain't about me. This ain't about anybody who's still walking around. Please remember, this day is about the people who didn't come home. And I had people coming after me like, oh, you don't understand. I'm like, fuck you, I don't understand. I have Veterans Day. That's out there, right? That's my day. This is for the day who people can't walk and can't take their kid to school. And I may grumble about cleaning my daughter's room on occasion, but at least I can, right? I'm here to do that. Whereas a lot of people can't. And people die in combat, and that is tragic. But we all sign up with that risk and knowing it's out there. But to bring it back to suicide, nobody expects to be abandoned after you come home, or to just suffer from some of the sort of loneliness and ways you just don't fit in with society anymore, because you've been kind of programmed to think differently. Because like for me, one of the biggest things, I will never forget this. And so that transition period, I think, is the most dangerous time for people as they get out. Right. And I will never forget this. I'd been out of the Army about 7 days when college started. It might've been 8. It was the second day of classes. Something administrative fell apart. And I got unenrolled from all my courses, right? So, of course, I go to the Department of Physics and say, hey, look, I got unenrolled. How do I fix it? I've been around long enough dealing with government operations that I'm like, okay, this is just a paperwork problem. Let's go fix it. And they go, oh, yeah, you go over here. Well, this was 96. Everything wasn't as automated as it is now. So I go wait in a line that stands from like this office to like where Jesus lost his shoes somewhere on the other side of the planet. And I wait for 2 hours. And that line goes, no, you got to go over here. Well, 3 offices later, they send me back to the Department of Physics. And I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Now, I'm former enlisted, right? I'm keeping my cool to this point. I haven't cursed at anybody yet. It came close a couple times, but I've kept my cool. I was patient. I may have cursed in German a couple times. But, I go back to the Department of Physics. And Department of Physics, the same person I saw that morning, sent me to a completely different office. And I muttered under my breath, I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. And the department chair heard me. And the department chair is at the time was a born again Baptist, which let's just tell you how good that went over. He pulled me in his office. He's like, get in my office. And he starts quoting chapter and verse. And I'm just like looking at the clock going, it's 3:45. I'm trying to get this shit fixed today. And it took me 20 minutes to realize he was actually angry, right? Because I'd been through drill sergeants. I'd been through platoon sergeants. I'd been through sergeant majors. I'd been through whatever. And it took me so long to realize he was actually pissed off at me. And it probably didn't help much when I told him he was quoting the wrong chapter of the Bible when he said something. But I went to Catholic school. He got so mad he was shaking. And I finally stopped, like, sir, time out. I have an administrative problem that apparently needs to be solved, and we need to solve it today. And he's like, what? And he got kind of mad at me, and he's kind of shaking at this point. And I was like, I told him the problem, and I was like, and by the way, sir, I appreciate the fact that you're a religious enthusiast. I get it. You work for the state. The state is part of the United States. It was a state-supported college. I was like, and which separates church and state in the Constitution, correct? And he goes, yeah. I was like, so will you shut the fuck up and help me with my problem? Right. So if you think about that for a minute, he did help me with my problem. I got back in my classes. He wasn't happy with me for like 2 years after that, but still, my point is that those are the kinds of things that as you transition, you don't think about, because on a military base, I could do that all day long. Right. I can speak like that. I can get pissed off like that. And everybody just think, okay, he's just trying to solve a problem. And it's just par for the course. Right. On a college campus, they damn near tried to run me out of that place. I mean, they were not happy with me at all. So that kind of transition stuff, you don't really get. Everybody's like, okay, good luck. See, it's all just like it is here. It's no problem. Right.
Like, we were coming back, and we get off the damn plane, and I said some stupid shit like, where's the Mista kids? And like we're literally the last plane in the division landing. So like we were the furthest north brigade, falling out, kind of working our way down to Kuwait. It's 2004. So like the Army don't know shit. Like we've had just enough of a goat rope that they're trying to put stuff together. And like, I'm literally the last plane out. And Mike, I don't recall if you'd entered, but I was a Brigade 1 in Iraq, no 304. And like we had to, it was simpler times.
Yes.
And we're getting ready to pull out, and like it's the last people are going. It's like the super hardcore troops. It's like these are the dudes who want watching our back on the way out of the entire division pullout, kind of those troops.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like supply guys, it was maintenance guys, it was personnel guys, the people that you needed to keep with you when you like, let's make sure everything gets out kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the bean pushers.
Well, yeah. So there's like half of them were bean pushers, and half of them were just utter killers. So we're folding the tents and getting to the plane, and then we get off the plane at Fort Hood. We flew straight into Fort Hood. Get off the plane, and it's like we're all trying to sit sideways in the bus because, we get there, and it's like I took the doors off the Humvee because it's like I don't want to get trapped in here with a grenade. And like I took the doors off my truck, and then like next thing I know, the whole freaking battalion, then the whole division's doing it. It's like, okay, cool. Like the battalion commander, like the nicest thing he ever said to me was like, "Oh, the mortar platoon's finally done something right. Let's take our doors off because it's a good idea. Everybody can shoot that way." So I was like, "Thanks, buddy. You're awesome." So we're getting out of this thing, and it's like we hit that whole formation thing, right? Unfortunately, nobody punched out their wife on that one. But we get out, and it's like, congratulations on your coming 72-hour pass, and everybody's woohoo, and we all leave. And we get back on our duty station for the Monday morning. And we got back on a Thursday, I think it was. And the duty station for the Monday morning is like, I don't remember what it was called, but it was like a reintegration training, something or other.
Oh God. Yeah.
And the first person in the integration training that we come across is she was a very pretty young woman who she was I got my assistant coming through. She's a very pretty woman who is being paid by the Army to do the reintegration training. Gracias, señorita. And she's obviously memorized her speech.
Oh God.
And it's so cameras here, her eyes are here, and like she's fiddling with her fingernails, like she was a very pretty woman. So she had the nice nails, the nice polish manicure, like French manicure thing. And she's so when the first 24 to 48 hours when soldiers return are the most dangerous for potential suicide. And I have spent a year in combat. I have more freaking gunfights under my belt than the entire HPD season a decade. Like, it's been an eventful year. And
You
because
don't
of
need some
how
clown telling you that it's the most dangerous time in your life.
she's a nice woman. She was very intimidated. We had seniors up front, senior NCOs in the back, and we had soldiers in the middle because I was apparently a role model. And I just stood there. I just sat there and just my little hand up. I just stared at her until she, yes. I said, man, we've just come off a 72-hour pass. If anyone was going to start their pistol, they would have been done it by now. Can we skip this part? Like, you come back from a year of doing the shit that we were doing, and your patience and your touchy-feelies are no longer what a civilian understands.
No,
Because
they're not.
you've touched a darkness that normal people don't get. And when they see it, they're going to go one of two ways. They're going to go the mortified way, or they're going to go the this shit ain't happening way. And
They're going to rabbit one way or the other.
yeah,
So
like, they're not going to deal with it.
I think you're touching on a very interesting point. Okay, so and this could be part of what leads to the problem that people face, because part of the problems with these suicides are certainly isolation. People spend more time alone because they'd rather be alone than with other people because of that kind of stuff, right? And whenever they do these suicide prevention things, it's like, oh, let's talk about our feelings. Let's talk about, and most of us are like, all right, we've seen the PowerPoints before. Can we just skip ahead where I can take the test that I've taken 17 times and fill it in for you now?
Yeah, memorize the answers that you want to hear.
Because we all know the answers. We don't give a shit, right? But that doesn't help you on a Saturday afternoon when you're sitting alone, right, in your apartment, wherever or whatever's going on, and you're just in your head in that dark place. And I think that you just struck on something very interesting. And part of that isolation for soldiers might come from we have very little tolerance for absolute bullshit, right? Yeah. Because we've seen the difference. Like I got divorced a couple of years ago, so not a big secret for anybody's on my channel. They've heard me complain about it. But the tolerance for me as a single person now is like almost zero for the games that go on in civilian life in that regard. It's, oh, let me, tell you all this shit that may or may not actually be true. Whereas I'm telling you, things that actually are true. And then people get pissed off at me when I'm like, okay, I really don't give a shit about all that superficial bullshit that goes on. I care about the actual things. And people are like, oh, I've got this problem. And it's like, I can't get the latest, like take my 14-year-old. It's like, well, so-and-so has a slightly better computer than I do. And I'm stressed. And my kids have it a little bit differently. I'm like, tough shit, man. You're 14. What the hell you want, right? But I see it in adults in a different fashion. I see it with their biggest stress in life is somebody might have a more recent model car than they do, and they get really stressed. Whereas me as a veteran, I'm like, that's your big stress in life? That's your big concern, is that somebody might have a 2-year newer car than you do. Shit, tough shit's tough all over, man. Suck it up and move on, right? And it's this whole keep up with the world and this appearance thing, and people want things to appear different. They don't give a shit how things are behind the scenes. They don't give a shit how things function. It's how things look. And to me, former military, and Mike, you were medic, and Doug, you as a commander, I don't give a shit what it looks like. I was on the sort of secret squirrel side of life. I give a shit how it operates. If it works, I'm happy. I don't care how it looks. I give a shit whether or not I'm going to live and somebody else isn't. That's my concern.
Just
Yep.
Thank you.
oh, by the way, like, I know this is superficial bullshit, officer land kind of shit, but having done investigations and audits, I'll tell you that a lot of times, if it doesn't look right and it doesn't smell right when I went in for an audit, so between my
Something's
Korea,
not right.
between my Korea platoon leader time and my infantry time, I had 2 staff positions, and as a lieutenant,
We don't listen to lieutenants, sir.
yeah, I know.
What's a lieutenant?
I know. And
we're like, oh, how cute.
Oh, yeah, we
thank you. Go away.
Basically.
So like,
Sir,
I'd show up to these audits.
The playground is over there.
Yeah. But I'd get in there, and like, I obviously had to negotiate around those issues. And then like, but there were certain things I'd look for. And like, if all of the ink on your charges were the same, I'd ask questions in your audit, like a financial audit, because I worked for division's comptroller. So like, if you were fudging the books and you kept some private up all night to recopy your stuff because it was all dog shit the day before I got there,
The ink's the same.
I would start asking questions, because why is this ink the same? Why is the handwriting the same on everything when you've got 16 different card holders? You know, sometimes how it looks, for better or worse, is going to lead you to the same shit conclusion. Whereas sometimes you can just tell when you look at a solution that these people have done it right consistently over a period of time. And that is an outside indicator of somebody doing something right. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that when they pencil whip something, or when they don't do something at all, you're going to get a lot of the same results. And it's like, you can tell.
So that brings up a notion. Somebody mentioned to me, and Mike, I think it was you, about the when Clinton was president, and I'm not going to get into any politics at all. The military went from one where if a soldier had a problem, you were allowed to fix it, and he could still have a career, to one where 0 defects were allowed.
Yep.
Right? Because there was a lot of downsizing going on. The military was getting smaller. And as a result, later on, you wound up with a military where you officers in particular, or senior enlisted people, would frag 3 or 4 people's careers if there might possibly sort of be something wrong with somebody. It's like, we don't know if there is or not. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But fuck it, he's an E4, kill him, right?
Yep.
Figuratively speaking.
Oh no, there was one that was almost literal, because I ended up working a rape case that was like that, and instead of going after the person that did the rape, they went after the girl, and it about killed her.
So those sorts of things go on, and I think that leads to real issues with mental health, and that leads to the suicide problem. So we've got this transition issue, we've got this 0 defect problem while you're on active duty, and all that kind of culminates to a large amount of pressure over a large amount of time. And I've been out since '96, so my attitude on it is a little bit different. But when I started looking at some of these numbers, and I started poking around the news on this stuff, the reason I started digging into this and looking for people who were in more recently than I was in, was everybody coming forward talking about this is either from the PR wing of the Pentagon, which is a group I've come to not trust very much over the years, because some of what they've said, I worked for a defense contractor.
I wonder why.
If you look at my list of patents, I actually am the patent holder on a great number of the patents that produce ballistic glass that went into Iraq and Afghanistan. Virtually all the MRAP glass was my design. And when I see people talking about it, I'm like, that's just not true at all. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not trusting that group anymore. But, so the only people that get to come out and talk about it are PR flacks from the Pentagon, or 06, 07, 08, who are looking for a paycheck from the Daily News, right? They're getting
who have been briefed into place by the PAO.
Right. And what they're doing is spouting statistics and they're spouting whatever else. They don't have marks on their knuckle like I do from bashing in a piece of glass to stop a guy who was trying to hang himself. Right? They don't have those experiences.
Like that
there
one.
You go. Yeah, like that one right there. Right. So you've got these people talking about the problem and saying, "Oh, we're going to fix it. We've allocated 3% more funding this year." But they're allocating funding and throwing it at the families after the fact. They're not looking at transition assistance, unemployment, underemployment, homeless vets. They're not looking at those problems and saying, how do we actually fix that instead of how do we just give it lip service and just, kind of hope and pray? Because we're not even talking about the VA today. That's a whole different can of worms I don't even want to open yet. But this problem alone, I think, could be fixed if they would actually start trying to solve the problems that really matter. And that transition problem where it's like, okay, have a nice day. You're out. See ya. Bye.
What's that whole Alcoholics Anonymous thing? Now, granted, I'm not Alcoholics Anonymous, but
quitters.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're not no quitters here.
No.
But, the whole alcohol, you got to admit you've got a problem. Yeah. And what's the first problem with zero defect? Zero defect means you have zero defects. And the first thing of admitting a problem is that you have a defect.
Yeah. Well, and the other aspect is you're coming from a group of, essentially you're coming from a pack of alpha males. And you're coming from, in Tim's case, snake eaters. Doug, from your case and mine, infantry. I mean, I worked with the armored infantry, the mech guys, and these guys are not going to admit when they're hurt. These guys are not going to admit when there's a problem. They could be walking around literally dragging, a broken leg. Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah, just tie your boot tighter.
Yeah, or duct tape.
There was speaking of which, Mike, you're exactly right, because there was a Navy SEAL who I used to do some work at Walter Reed on traumatic brain injury and how to prevent it, with some helmet changes when I was still on the university side. And there was this Navy SEAL who was there, and I was talking to one of the doctors, like, yeah, this guy's really messed up. And I was like, how messed up can he be? And like, well, you see, they showed me his x-ray, and I was kind of used to looking at MRIs and x-rays at that point because I was working on armor systems. And if anybody doesn't realize, when you get hit in the body armor, it ain't like the movies where you got to stand up 2 minutes later and move on. So we were really interested in behind armor trauma of what that really looks like. So we actually got really deep into what's that behind armor trauma look like and how do we actually kind of fix it, right? And how do we make it less traumatic? And you're never going to drive it to zero.
I did.
Yeah, you're never gonna make it zero, but you can at least make it better. So I dealt with a lot of doctors there, and they showed me this one guy who was an active Navy SEAL who came in for he was like a shattered L6 or something, and I was like, he walked in under his own power, and they're like, oh yeah, and if you look here, these two are old shatters. He just never bothered to come in for. I was like,
yeah.
It just blew my mind. This guy was out on active duty as a freaking SEAL with 3 discs in pieces, and he never bothered to come in for help.
Fuck.
Right?
I my first squadron was 470 cavalry, and like we had to research that sort of stuff. And apparently, after the battle, the Bighorn, like the anthropologist went out there and dug up a bunch of bodies and stuff, and they're like, "These guys are all arthritic in their backs. How did they do anything? They're so tore up." And it's like,
carrying 100 pounds plus all the time.
Riding a horse with all the crap in your back and the horse, and
800 milligrams Motrin, taking 3 tablets 6 times a day.
Yeah. So to tie that back to suicide, there's another cause of it. So and I can actually kind of blame the VA a bit for this. So
hey, you said no VA.
Maybe a little VA. So but it ties to suicide. So bear with me a second. So my knees are shot to hell because I jumped out of too many airplanes over the years. But if you ever met anybody who ever asks why you learned how to jump out of an airplane, if you'd ever met an Army mechanic, you'd want to know how to do it too. But former mech guy, I had to say something. But
Dude, I had a mechanic fix my ambulance with fucking quarters. Okay, literally put fucking quarters in one of the springs and was like, "Okay, you're good."
It's like, what? Yeah, so that's
kidding
hiring a
me.
mechanics for. But the point is, I have knee problems and I have private insurance, so I could take care of it without going to the VA. But other people who've gone to the VA with chronic pain issues because of arthritis, because of breaks that never healed properly, because of, hey, look, and people will pick on the medics. And Mike, I'm going to clear you of all this here in a second. People say, oh, well, the medic didn't set it properly. The medic set it while he was under fucking fire. Right. Or like in Afghanistan and Iraq, both, an IED would go off, you'd respond to it. And there's a second IED waiting for the medics to show up. Right. And we're looking for the guy who's going to trigger it somewhere. And the medics are twitchy trying to get stuff done fast. So you can't really blame the medic for not setting something properly when he didn't have x-rays. He didn't have a proper thing. He's just bracing it saying, get back to the hospital as fast as you can. You can't blame the medic for this. Right. This is clearly it didn't get fixed at a hospital level. But the point is, those chronic pain problems are being ignored by the VA because the VA has sort of this denied until they die kind of attitude, right? It's like, oh, is it service related? And if you don't come in the first 12 months, they try to make you prove it's service related. Well, if it takes you 11 and a half months to get a freaking appointment, how are you going to prove it's service related if you have to reschedule once, right? It's a big problem. And that, I think, also exacerbates the suicide problem, especially amongst combat vets or people who served in some of the more hair-raising, adventurous units. But to me, all that stuff kind of ties together, and we're looking at it wrong. We're like, okay, well, let's throw money here. Let's do hearts and prayers, prayers and whatever, and throw some money at the families after. But we're not looking at how to really say, okay, it is, service related, and burn pits are a prime example of that. How do we know you developed throat cancer at the age of 28? Well, fucking burn pits.
But you slept next to a damn burn pit.
But you smoked. Okay, I didn't smoke a carton a day.
I didn't smoke at all. But you were in the Army. You must have smoked. Okay, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, or the other lovely one, burning shit. That was
Well, burn pits, right? I mean, everything from medical waste to body parts to car engines.
Why is the sunset in the Middle East so beautiful?
Because of all the goddamn pollution.
Because all the shit and pollution in the freaking air.
Yeah.
It would be illegal to run a burn pit here in the United States. Okay, that's how toxic those things are.
It would be illegal to 1/10 of the crap that goes in there would get anybody thrown in jail.
Right. And then we burn it right next to the base, and we're like, oh, is it service related?
And
well, yeah.
Yes, fuck, try in.
Well, don't even. I'll step away from combat real quick. Step away from burn pits. But just in Korea, that country was a burn pit. Like, we would run down Patty Road, which was basically, it was like a causeway through the middle of rice paddies for like the little gator trucks. And we would run platoon and sometimes troop formation through these little causeways. And now, granted, the wind is blowing in our face and the freaking rice paddies are swimming against the wind because all the freaking leeches and parasites growing in the water. But the haze in every valley where the farming is going on in Korea, where they don't have standardized like trash collection,
which is everywhere except Seoul, basically,
it's everybody burning their toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take their human waste and put it into the rice paddies, which is why you've got the water swimming against the freaking wind. And it's like, don't fall off the dike because nobody's going in to pull you off. You're walking back with all that stuff hanging off you on the way in. And it's like, I am just waiting for the cancer to show up from freaking Korea.
It's
not even combat.
It's coming.
Yeah,
it's coming.
I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I think these are parts of the reasons that when the 06 class and up goes on the news and talks about this stuff, Everybody overlooks this stuff, like, oh, it just costs of doing business. Well, yeah, whereas the 06s and up are often the nice little shiny places getting driven around. Us people on the ground don't have that, and that leads to all the suicide and other problems. I mean, we don't even want to talk about the divorce rate inside the special ops, right? There's like one marital status in special ops, and it's divorced.
I'm currently married to my next ex-wife.
Basically, that's it.
And why is it we all laugh at that joke? because we've all seen it.
Yeah, we've all seen it. Because
I'm married to my first ex-wife, so.
Well, yeah, but yours is meaner than yours.
Yes, she is.
But the point is that it's a lifestyle that just doesn't support having a family. It's just not cohesive because you're gone all the time. You're never home. And to be in a relationship, you got to be home. So when you get out, you don't really know how to do that kind of thing, right? It kind of takes you a while to transition.
I mean, early on when I was talking about me getting off the plane, and I made the crack about the Mista kids, and everybody on the bus back, we all started laughing together. We're a bunch of freaking hard-ass combat vets. There's 50 of us crowded into a 30-man bus. And we're all laughing because there's no Mista kids. And it was literally 15 minutes of us going from the freaking airport to their goofy little stand in formation and check out kind of thing. And I attached a little throwaway line to that, and then nobody knocked their spouse out.
Yeah, like I heard that.
I say that in a military crowd, and you all know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Any civilians who listen may or may not understand that when Susie Q comes running up saying, "Oh, darling, I've missed you," and darling,
because Susie Q is 8 months pregnant
with somebody else's kid on a 12-month deployment, and Johnny has been overseas with his buddy Timmy, telling him, "Hey, Susie Q is out at the club doing blah blah blah. She took 3 dudes home tonight, dude. Y'all need to get home and fix this." And he's known it for 11 months, 10 months, and he gets back, and it's like nobody did it when my plane arrived, but it happens.
I saw one of those on TikTok or one of the platforms the other day. There was this woman who was talking to her currently deployed Marine boyfriend who'd been deployed for like 7 months, and she just found out she was pregnant, right? So she was calling to tell him, "Oh, I'm pregnant," and he was just pissed. And she's like, "Oh, why aren't you talking to me? I don't understand. Why aren't you talking to me?" And you could see his just like fucking wheels are turning. He's just angry as can be. He's ready to go blow something up. And then up at the top of her screen, you can actually see one of the dating sites kept sending her push messages about she had a
Match.com
or something was sending her these push messages. And you want another reason for suicide? There it is, right? It's if you're in a relationship, and I'm saying, soldiers are hard to be in relationships with, but you know what you get going in, right? They could be gone for 12 or 18 months. They could be gone like in special ops. You get the message and you disappear. Where are you going? I don't know.
But it's selfish,
right? So
and it's selfish.
But that racks with your brain, and when you get back, your sense of self-worth goes to zero. And how many people have we seen volunteer for deployment after deployment after deployment because they'd rather be there than here at this point?
Yeah,
right? It's like, shit, fucking send me back, man. It's at least it makes sense there, right? And there was a couple.
You have no idea how much sense it makes.
Yeah, I mean, I used to. I read a lot of books. I read a couple biographies from the Korean War and Vietnam, where people were volunteering to go back because they just didn't want to live anymore. And they're like, it's easier to die in combat than kill yourself. Right? So these guys were going back sort of voluntarily, just looking for a way to die.
They can do something constructive until it happens.
Do something. At least you live in a world you understand, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's not even that you understand it. Like for me, it was the people with me. We got into fights all the freaking time, but the folks with me always came home. Where I struggle, and the people who visit me at night, and the faces that I see, it's from the folks that I couldn't help. It's from the folks who freaking went their own way and didn't fucking listen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can still see the salt rings on my buddy's arms. Like, it's been 24 years. It's been 21 years. And I can still see see the salt rings. Every freaking salt ring on his fucking uniform. And I said, dude, you need to fix your freaking armor. Because you got all this shit hanging off your body armor. You're wearing that as a platoon leader in a Bradley, dude. You're a big dude. You can't do that fucking hatch. And like 36 hours later, I was out on fucking patrol and I listened to my buddy die exactly like I told him he was going to fucking die. Imagine the fucking guilt you're carrying around from that shit. I couldn't convince my buddy. The number one dude outside of my company, who was my buddy, was the first frickin' person killed in 4th Infantry Division since Vietnam. It was my buddy, and I fucking told him how he was going to die. Imagine those fucking nightmares. And then, my nightmares come from the people I couldn't help. My nightmares come from saying, like, spending the time to look at what the enemy was doing and then having people ignore my fucking orders. We've indexed, and I get a call from the brigade commander saying, Captain Franklin, why the fuck did I just lose a Humvee on the way down to Balad for your mission? Sir? Blah, 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 blah. Missed movement. We left. We executed. We indexed. Then they left. During the heat of the frickin' insurrection, waking up in the morning. Like, we knew statistically when these dudes were active because they were active in the morning when it was cool. Yeah. They went to sleep and they were active in the evening when the sun was going down. We knew when they were there. I scheduled my movements to get us out and back before all that shit happened. We lost 3 soldiers that day. Like, civilians don't understand. Like, a civilian is not going to cross that Rubicon. When you're pulling your soldiers out of the back of a freaking truck that's got blood running out the back like fucking rivers. And it's like, a civilian's not going to understand that. And they're not going to cross that Rubicon willingly. Because it's a hard place to go. It's a hard place to visit. And those troops survived somehow. But all 3 of them lost parts. Eyes, leg, arm. But all 3 of them lost parts. We lost a truck. My company commander for the brigade got to enjoy himself being shown on fucking Al Jazeera as the first sergeant's Humvee burned down to the frickin' road. Like, and then I get the call saying, why is blah, 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 blah showing up, taking casualties? That they didn't bother coming with us. Like, those are my nightmares. Those are the soldiers who visit me at night. And it's for me, it's not the bad guys doing the bad things who wound up with bad things happening to them. For me, it's the troops who were put in positions to not succeed. And those are the faces that come to visit me at night. And
so if either of you guys had a chance, because I wanted to keep this to about an hour. We got a few minutes, but if either of you guys had a chance to go to Congress or Senate and say this could help reduce suicides in veterans, and you had one shot to say, here's the idea. What I'll let you go first, Doug. What would you tell them, other than take your hearts and prayers and shove it where the sun doesn't shine?
Other than pick up a rifle and get to the front.
Yeah, we were not allowed to say that.
Okay,
it wouldn't help because they're too old anyway.
I'm sorry. We got knee replacements for that kind of stuff. I'm more of a mind that I have a fundamental distrust for politicians and journalists. And I carry that
assholes.
I wonder why.
And I carry that distrust based upon the folks that I've interacted with on both of those career fields.
Yep.
My take on it is a more private sector approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that it would be great if we have a better transition program. I'd mentioned to Tim that I suffered a egregious and extremely costly exit from the military because the major who is not deployed as the one for Iraq didn't think I was actually going to leave the military, so he just kind of strung me along, and I had 4 days to clear the entire army.
Sounds like me. Yeah.
So yeah, see, he figured that he could string me along and force me to stay in the military, and I was like, yeah, I can't run in a straight line anymore, bud. I need to get out. So, but yeah, it is what it is. I would take the approach that we need to. I think that a better solution for us would be to approach things from how do we position ourselves and make ourselves more of a cohesive force. I suffered when I left the military for about 6 months. I lived in a shitty little apartment by myself. One room, one bedroom, one bathroom, one shitty little roach-filled kitchen because my neighbors were slobs. And it was just, that was probably the low point in my life. And I suspect that if we had a more generalized network, even a, hey, sign up with this group. There's a bunch of veterans out there who have businesses, because I'm personally too defiant to work for anybody at the point. Like, after working for the jackasses I worked for when I got out of the army, like I can't sit still and let somebody else dictate my future. Like it just drives me bonkers. Like, I would hire a veteran to do all kinds of shit. As long as we're making money together, I'll throw veteran money any day of the freaking week. I don't want to pay some VA in another country. I'd much rather put a veteran to work for, hey, would you like to do this? And there's troops with all kinds of skills. And it's like, I suspect if we could pull together a veterans forum, like a large skills based forum, we could put ourselves into a better position and help each other out like we did. Hey dude, you need cheese spread with that. You need cheese spread with that as opposed to frickin' jelly with your frickin' taco.
Yeah.
Mike, so if you had anything you could tell a congressman or senator, because I might be on the phone with one tomorrow.
I would put it. Let's see if we can put together I think we called it DROS when I was stepping out for the enlisted side. I didn't participate in that program because other side of the fence, but it was like a job based, like enlisted troops would wind up with like 3 to 4 months worth of job based training and such. And Mike, I'm sure you could.
Yeah, I kind of had the same situation as you. They kept jerking me around, and I got my orders that were issued. Like,
well, then
Yeah. So my orders I picked up on January 1st or January 2nd, and I was out on January 10th. So yeah, I had like 5 days to clear Fort Hood.
Yeah, it was.
In the infamous CIS. So yeah, I didn't get any of the benefit of transition or any of the bullshit.
Yeah, so here's your bus pass. Have a nice day, right?
I didn't even get the bus pass. If I had one thing to say to the to Congress, it would be get the bullshit, get the politics out of the VA. You can't, if you're going to run the VA as a political base, it's going to fail. You've got to run it as a nonprofit hospital. And the reason I say that is, yes, you've got a budget coming from the federal government. But when you start running it with the politics involved, then you start getting people can't get fired. Bad shit that happens gets overlooked. Then you start getting the kill lists, the die lists, the wait lists, the secret lists. You get the people that can't get appointments or like, and I know you said no talking shit about the VA, but like I just had an appointment pushed back for another year.
A year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're still breathing? Okay, good. You don't need to see the pulmonologist.
So deny till they die, right? That's the typical mantra is deny till they die.
Yeah.
And
I had
you've got to get the political bullshit out of it.
So I think part of the problem is they always appoint a retired general or something to go run the place, which of course adds politics to it because if you're a general, you're into politics at some point. I know it speaks ill of the officer corps, but I was enlisted. I'm allowed to do that. I think you're right. Getting the politics out of it could be a big thing, and that could solve some of the problem. But I think I know a number of congressmen and one senator pretty well. And what I'm going to go in and talk to them about is of course, the VA is a god awful mess that needs to just be scraped and started over again. But personally, I want to push for. I think removal of politics is a great idea. I think some sort of private sector answer is a good idea. And I also really want to push on the underemployment that veterans face and how employers, they all ask if you're a veteran, but none of them really give a shit unless you're an 06 or up, right? And then they use that to go walk you into the Pentagon and try to go do business development purposes. So, I think those are the areas I want to push. And if I can, I might have you guys both come back on in a week or two once I talk to some of those folks. We can kind of round robin what I've found out. And I'm going to push one of them to actually come on and talk to us if one of them's stupid enough to actually accept that invitation. But I have one that owes me a big favor, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah. But I've got to be on another stream in about 7 minutes, so I hate to cut this one short, but otherwise I'm going to start getting pissed off, and I don't want to do that because it's one of those things that I have about an hour's tolerance for this subject before I start getting just angry and screaming at things. So let's leave it there, and everybody have a great night, and I will see you on the next one.
Yep.
Appreciate it.